supporting Singaporeans through COVID-19, the government outlines plans for a society that leaves no one behind.
Virus resurging, more than a dozen construction projects come to a standstill after workers test positive.
And virus reinfection, a Hong Kong man is the world's first confirmed case of someone who got infected twice.
It's 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman.
And I'm Olivia Quay. Now remember to subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
It's back to business for the government after the President's address last night, marking the opening of Parliament. In the coming days, various ministries will take turns to outline in detail their priorities and plans and what they are working for the next 5 years.
Well, the Health, Education and Social and Family Development Ministries released their addenda or statement a few moments ago. They plan to sustain and overcome the fight against COVID-19, support Singaporeans affected by the virus to help them emerge stronger, provide opportunities for every Singaporean to achieve their full potential and build a caring, inclusive and cohesive society where no one is left behind. So let's break it all down with political correspondent Linette Lai. So Linette, what stood out for you?
So I think one thing you probably know about the addenda is that ministries always use it to set up their priorities for the next term. And in this year, what's interesting is the impact that COVID-19 has had on the agenda for all the ministries. It's very clear from what we have today that a lot of the focus is on strengthening social support, helping people through the crisis. And we have three ministries today, Health, Education, and the Ministry of Social and Family Development. And I think MSF in particular will have a lot to do in the coming years, especially because, retrenchments are starting, people are suffering pay cuts, those who are already vulnerable, the low income and so on, they'll be some of the hardest hit. And that's, I think this is something that we'll be seeing on the agenda of all the ministries, the impact of the virus.
Right. Let's talk about President Halimah's address last night. From the address last night and today's agenda by MOH, MOE and MSF, some main themes are apparent, like inclusiveness, resilience and social mobility. But these are ideas we've heard about even before COVID-19. So in what ways has the outbreak changed the government's priorities, if at all?
I don't think the priorities have really shifted. Like you said, in recent years, there's been a lot of talk about social mobility, inclusivity, trying to level the playing field. But now with COVID, there's a much greater sense of urgency. For example, there may be things that were planned for much further ahead in the future that they're needed now and they've been brought forward. So one example is how all secondary school students will get a laptop or tablet for learning next year. The original target was 2028, which is, so they brought it ahead by 7 years. And that's really necessary because there'll be blended learning going ahead. So students will learn both online and the traditional method. So things like that. So the priorities are the same, but certain things have been brought ahead. And of course, certain development projects especially may be pushed back or put on the back burner right now.
Right. Well, Linette, out of the three ministries that released their addenda today, two have new ministers at the helm, Lawrence Wong at MOE and Masagos Zulkifli over at MSF. Now, as you said, the COVID-19 pandemic already brings about a sense of urgency, but do you think the new and perhaps enthusiastic leaders at these two ministries will further add to more policies being pushed out as soon as possible?
So I think policies in Singapore especially really transcend personality. Traditionally, the way Singapore has done things is that it tries to plan long-term as far as possible. It places a premium on continuity, on performance as a team rather than on, any specific leader or their personality. Of course, it's not to say that these new leaders won't have new ideas, new things to bring to the table. And of course, each new leader will hope to leave their own legacy or their own mark on a ministry, but that doesn't mean that we will see policies being pushed out for the sake of it.
Well, good
So I
points
hope that
there.
answers your question.
certainly does. Thank you very much, Linette. That was political correspondent at the Straits Times, Linette Lai. Head over to straitstimes.com to read all about the ministry's responses to President Halimah's address last night.
On that note, Madam Halimah made a key point last night, Olivia, pledging that the government will evolve its policies and listen to new ideas objectively.
Well, that's right. So what can Singaporeans expect of the 14th Parliament? Well, MPs and NCMPs gave their reaction.
What is important is that whether government or opposition, the most important thing is that the interests of Singaporeans must be front and centre, and the interests of Singapore. You can expect that there will be robust debate. You can expect that there will be, an exchange of ideas, and we look forward to a more colourful debate. But at the end of the day, those are the things which matter.
Now, in order to provide concrete policy proposals, actually, information is very important. You cannot make recommendations out of thin air, right? You need data to support what you're going to recommend. So I hope that this means that the government will be more forthcoming in providing information that is in the hands of the public sector.
We also have younger generation of Singaporeans that are coming of age. And they have grown up in a very different Singapore than their parents and certainly their grandparents. Their hopes of the future are important to our nation. We need to be able to understand their aspirations. We need to be able to translate their aspirations into policies. And we also need to put in place the programs that bring their aspirations to life.
On to the latest COVID-19 figures in Singapore. 31 new cases were confirmed today. There were 0 community cases for the 4th time this month.
But there was one imported case who had been placed on stay-home notice upon arrival here. The Health Ministry will release more details tonight.
In other local headlines, visitors from New Zealand and Brunei who successfully applied to come to Singapore must use the Trace Together app throughout their stay here. Now, they must also keep the app in their phone for 14 straight days after leaving, and if they test positive for COVID-19, they'll need to upload the stored data to the Health Ministry.
The Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore said today that interested visitors from New Zealand and Brunei can apply for an air travel pass via the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority's website from noon on September 1st. Applications, though, must be done between 7 and 30 days before their intended date of entry.
Visitors have to fulfill 2 other conditions. First, they must have spent the last 14 days in New Zealand or Brunei before flying to Singapore on direct flights. In Singapore, they'll have to take private transport, taxi or private hire car from the airport to a declared place of accommodation. Now this after taking the PCR test at the airport.
They then have to remain isolated at the accommodation until the test result is out within 48 hours, and only when they test negative are they allowed to go about their activities in Singapore.
Meanwhile, budget carrier Scoot has apologized to its customers for sending out a mass email in which it asked passengers to take COVID-19 tests to confirm if they're virus-free before they can travel to China. It clarified that the email was meant only for passengers who have booked a flight on board TR100, which will depart from Singapore to Guangzhou at 5:15 a.m. on Sunday. Instead, the email was sent to customers who were booked on other flights.
More travel-related news. Changi Airport's first online shopping campaign is up and running and will run for 7 weeks. From Vouchers Monday to live stream Thursdays, shoppers can expect deals for nearly 9,000 tax and duty-free products. It's the latest retailer to launch a virtual event with the coronavirus pandemic changing the way people shop.
In its daily COVID-19 evening update yesterday, the Health Ministry announced a new cluster linked to a workers' dormitory in Tuas. This Tuas View dormitory cluster came after one of the new COVID-19 patients, confirmed yesterday, was linked to 5 previous cases.
It's the third straight day that a new dorm cluster has emerged after all dorms were declared free of the coronavirus last Wednesday. Last Saturday, a new cluster was found to be linked to Sungai Tengah Lodge in Old Choa Chu Kang Road. Then, a day after, Homestay Lodge at Kaki Bukit was also identified as a cluster.
To further discuss this issue of resurgence of cases in dorms, we're joined by health economist Dr Phua Kai Hong. Now, Dr Phua is an adjunct senior research fellow with the Institute of Policy Studies at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Dr Phua, welcome to the show. Doctor, in line with Singapore's safe reopening, safe management measures are in place at the work sites and dorms. So, looking at the current protocol, what and where could be possible gaps in which the workers are getting infected? Is it the implementation of safety measures or the way the workers are segregated or even the testing protocol?
I think all of the above. If we want to do an evidence-based approach based on what we know from science, we will have to take a comprehensive approach. I think the first issue is therefore in the test. The test to confirm whether they are fit to work, whether they are free of the disease. So essentially, what we will recommend will be to standardize many of these tests to have higher quality control, and therefore maybe have a second test, to confirm it. Not just the first test, which may miss the results, but then have a second test to back it up as well.
Right. Well, Dr. Phua, having previously declared that all the dorms are virus-free, is this resurgence then of cases a cause for alarm, or is it at the very least a bit of a setback in the efforts to clear these dorms?
Well, we cannot have a foolproof system in the ability to pick up 100% of cases. So we will try to reduce the errors as far as possible. So the first one is to look at the science, right, and to look at the accuracy, and to try to have quality control and to remove those errors as far as possible for the scientific test. Then the second part will be the human errors. The human errors, for example, how you collect the samples, whether you do the swabs correctly and whether it's deep enough, and then the timing of the swabs until the samples are analyzed in the lab. The timing must be reduced from the time you collect it until the time you actually send it to the lab for analysis, because the viral samples could break down within the timing. It is too long. So we have to reduce all those human errors and standardize it so as to make the tests more accurate, the results more accurate. But of course, then the third part will be the entire system to make sure that all these behaviors and human errors will be minimized. We will have to ensure that the system will not provide perverse incentives for either the employees or the employers to game the system, right? To show that they are fit to work and they are clear of the disease, and then you rush them back to work, and then there will be a trade-off between them picking up passing on the infections as well, and then it will lead to a community infection. So there's a trade-off between their livelihoods and to lower the cost, as well as to lower the social costs and to reduce the risk of transmission.
Great sharing there. Very valuable insights indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Phua, for setting aside time to speak with us. We were speaking to health economist Dr. Phua Kai Hong, who's an adjunct senior research fellow with the Institute of Policy Studies at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy.
Dylan Ang here with the global headlines. Hong Kong researchers said a man who recovered from COVID-19, who later tested positive again, is the first documented instance of human reinfection. Their findings indicate that the virus could continue to spread among the global population, despite herd immunity. The 33-year-old Hong Kong man was first cleared and discharged in April, but tested positive once more after returning from Spain via Britain earlier this month. Meanwhile, new social distancing arrangements are set to be announced in Hong Kong as a result of pressure from restaurants and other small businesses to relax distancing measures. South Korea today ordered all schools and kindergartens in the Greater Seoul region to switch to online classes as they battle multiple coronavirus clusters. This will be in effect until September 11th, with the only exception being senior students in their final year of high school. Elsewhere, US President Donald Trump has been formally nominated by the Republican Party to take on Democrat Joe Biden in the November presidential election. Speaking on the first day of the Republican National Convention in North Carolina, Mr. Trump repeated his much disputed claims that mail-in ballots could lead to voter fraud, which could mean he would face a rigged election. But he went on to state his resolve to win.
They're going to mail out 80 million ballots. It's impossible. They have no idea. Who's mailing them? Mostly Democrat states and Democrat governors. Well, supposing they don't mail them to Republican neighborhoods. The only way they can take this election away from us is if this is a rigged election. We're going to win this election.
Former Brazil football star Ronaldinho and his brother were released today after spending 5 months in detention over forged passports in Paraguay. They had arrived in the country in March, where Ronaldinho was due to take part in an event to support disadvantaged children. They were later taken into custody after investigators raided their hotel and discovered fake documents. 8-time Olympic gold medalist Usain Bolt has tested positive for the coronavirus, a week after celebrating his 34th birthday party, which had received online criticism for being mask-free. In an earlier Twitter video, he had said he was self-quarantining while waiting for his test results.
I did a test on Saturday to leave because I have work, trying to be responsible, so I'm going to stay in and stay from my friends. And also having no symptoms, so going to quarantine myself and wait on the confirmation to see what is the protocol and how should I go about quarantining myself.
Among those who attended Bolt's birthday party was Manchester City footballer Raheem Sterling, who has also been advised to self-isolate. And those are the headlines around the world. It's back to you guys in the studio.
Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.